Well, Prime Minister Carney rolling out a series of measures on Friday that he says will transform Canada's economy. Corinne Pullman from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business joining us this morning. Corinne, thanks for your time. And I guess if it was a big announcement, but what did stand out for you in what you heard on Friday from the Prime Minister?
Well, a few things. It was a rather large announcement, had lots of sort of components to it that were interesting. Of course, one of the big ones that gets a lot of airtime is the fact that they've expanded EI benefits for up to 20 more weeks, as well as continuing some benefits that they had already sort of improved on earlier this year, going beyond October, which was the deadline for that. So that's one of them, which is a bit of a concern for us, simply because that adds cost to the EI system, and it's unclear whether it'll be employers and employees that pay for those costs or whether it'll be the government. But in addition to that, of course, were a number of different types of funding mechanisms, some of them very targeted, some of them are more broad-based, many of them in the loan category, and those are the ones that we're watching closely. And so those would be, I think, among the most important that came out on Friday.
Yeah, so that loan size increase, this is for small and medium-sized businesses. How much will those types of initiatives help businesses that are struggling? And do you have any concern about sort of the form that that's taking?
Yeah, so we are concerned that seems like most of the supports that are being announced, especially the ones targeting small, medium-sized companies, are in the form of loans. And small companies are still kind of reeling from COVID. Many still have debt from COVID. So they're not really keen on taking on new debt in order to try to get through another crisis. So there is a component that said that some of these loans may be non-repayable, which I think has some merit to it, which could be interesting. However, our concern is that probably will be very focused and very specific to certain types of industries and may not necessarily benefit the ones that really need it. So while we're pleased to see that the loans and the funding seems to be broad-based, we're worried that this component is mostly going to be in the form of loans and not in the form of potentially non-repayable, which is really what is needed at the moment in terms of liquidity for those businesses directly affected by these tariffs.
And so that's one gap, obviously, CFIB has identified. Anything else missing that you would have liked to have seen included in these measures?
Well, of course, like I said, the fact that we'd like to see some movement in terms of providing a bit more liquidity to small and medium-sized companies. There's a lot of details in here that are not in this announcement, so it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this and how well it will be taken up by the industry and by small businesses in particular, and whether it actually addresses the issues that we're hearing. And I think the jury's out on that until we kind of see what these particular programs look like in action. So it's a bit of a wait and see attitude, some potentially positive components, but also some potentially maybe not so good.
Okay, and I have to ask you about tariffs before we run out of time here. I know the CFIB was in favor of some of those tariffs levied against the U.S. in retaliation being dropped. Do you think more could be done on that front? Where do you stand on this sort of tariff war that's happening?
It's been tough. We've been going on 6 months, and certainly I would say in the last couple of months in particular, we've seen those costs really start to pinch at small businesses as they try to figure out how they're going to sort of continue to absorb that. In fact, we saw support for counter tariffs go from 75% in February down to about 50-50 in August. So we knew that it was getting tougher. So removing retaliatory tariffs on CUSMA compliant goods, I think, was a good move to help a lot of those businesses that were sort of struggling to figure out how they're going to continue to absorb those costs. Going forward, of course, it is about making sure that we can get the best deal possible and get some certainty out there. But until we get to that point, making sure that there is an avenue for many of these businesses directly affected to be able to get some liquidity in their business quickly.
Okay, yeah, very hard to determine right now when that might even happen. Very much appreciate your time this morning, Corinne. That is Corinne Pullman from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business.